Sitting in a way that's comfortable and upright. Bringing our attention to our breathing. Or if the breath is not conducive for you, using an object that is supportive, but bringing our attention to that object, aware, present, and happy. It might be useful to smile and bring some of those chemicals to life that help us to be happy and content. Relaxed. Today we're going to talk about Samadhi. So how do we prepare ourselves and set the conditions for the mind to become still and lucid? That there's a brightness, a presence, and awareness that's clear. So it begins by staying with our meditation object and really bringing up a sense of inquiry, a sense of interest. We're feeling the breath, aware of the in-breath and the out-breath. And letting the tension that we might be holding in the body drain away. Can be aware of whether our in-breath is long or short, or our out-breath is long or short. When we ask questions about our breath, or we take notice of these characteristics, we're setting up mindfulness. Mindfulness is an essential part of Samadhi. Right Samadhi always has mindfulness and clear comprehension. We're aware and discerning. But not busy with thought, allowing the body to become calm and also the mind to become calm. Staying with each in breath and each out breath, just observing the calming of the body, feeling the energy in the body. Noticing any pleasant feeling that might be arising from becoming more aware, alert, and calm. If the mind becomes distracted, then of course we bring it back to our meditation object. And we can really use that object, the breath, as an anchor. If the mind is busy, then we can pay more attention to our out breath and really allow that out breath to be a calming influence. On the other hand, if the mind is sluggish or dull, we can put extra emphasis on the in breath, bring up more energy, more clarity. The Buddha encouraged that we be aware of those pleasant feelings arising because that's the beginning of piti, bliss, joy, rapture. I'm not sure any of our English words quite describe it, but it's a spiritual energy. The Thais call it breath energy. It comes through oftentimes with a focus on our breath or whatever object we're using. And of course, requires relaxation, that we're not holding tight and letting go so that spiritual energy can flow freely through us. Sometimes thinking of something, bringing in an image or a thought of something that really inspires us can lift up the heart. Can open the way for more calm and more joy. So our attention is on our object, on our breath, or whatever object you're using, and also taking an interest in it, a fascination with it, or an appreciation of it. That's more like it. appreciating the breath. And notice the relationship between awareness and appreciation of the breath and this calming experience and the joy that can come from it. At any point, we can invite the mind to become more calm, noticing what kinds of things are coming up in the mind, passing through the mind, and then really inviting that activity to become more still. And whenever we feel tired or bored or in some way a little aversion, then bring in more happiness, more kindness, more love for yourself and others, for this process, this opportunity, this practice, this amazing Dhamma that we rely on. The happier we are, the more joy we feel, the more piti, sukha, the more contentment there is. So stay present and aware. The quality of your attention on your breath, the uplift of the mind. This is what opens the way to Samadhi. If the mind starts thinking about something else, of course, bring it back. And just set the intention for the mind to incline towards peace, towards tranquility. And I'm going to read a little bit. Um, Something flashed on the screen, but I didn't see what it was. Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Okay, good. So I'm gonna, um, well, of course, there are these qualities that the Buddha described as being part of samadhi. And in the suttas, right, samadhi is generally described as the jhanas, the four jhanas. But many people, in fact, in the Thai forest tradition, they really um, much of the time don't talk about it in terms of jhanas so much. And that certainly was Ajahn Chah's approach. I'm starting to understand that more over the years because um, it's so easy when we think about, oh, there's these four levels, and um, I want to get them. And they have these descriptions, and I want to hit the marks of, okay, I'm experiencing this, whatever, or no, or I'm not. I can't. It's hopeless. I can't get into any of those states. That kind of feeling can also be there. And what I see with people sometimes is that they get very tense around it. Someone just described that to me on this retreat that I'm leading. She's been working with a system that has all these criteria of, okay, you can, you do this and you hit this, um, basically check this off. And she says it, when she goes on retreat, she gets really tense. Is she gonna like hit the marks? Well, of course, that's not how meditation works. We can't just fabricate um, the officially listed conditions and really set the mind up for the kind of wisdom and awakening that is really the intention of the path. So here's a few words from Ajahn Chah about this, in particular, that he didn't speak in terms of jhanas, but that um, it's important to realize that the same things were happening in meditation. He was encouraging the same kind of experience, just not with these labels that can get us all caught up. So here's this is from Stillness Flowing, the biography. I'm sure some of you know about it, maybe everyone does, and I really recommend reading it cover to cover and then start over again. At least that's what I'm doing. So, in this section on samadhi, he says, if the mind is clear, then it's just like sitting here normally and seeing things around you. Closing the eyes becomes no different from opening them. Seeing while the eyes are closed becomes the same as seeing with the eyes open. There's no doubt about anything at all, merely a sense of wonder. How can these things be possible? It's unbelievable, but there they are. There will be sustained appreciation, and that's how he talked about vichara. So I mentioned in in the meditation, and he will talk here about the five qualities that are samadhi, that are part of samadhi, and also the first jhana. There will be sustained appreciation, vichara, arising spontaneously in conjunction with rapture, happiness, a fullness of heart, and lucid calm. Subsequently, the mind will become even more refined and will be able to discard the meditation object. Now, vitaka, so he's got vitaka and vichara. These are the first two qualities that are listed as part of the first jhana and are part of samadhi. vitaka is the placing of the mind on the object, and vichara is the investigation of that object or maintaining um, our attention on the object. So he says, now vitaka, the lifting of the mind onto the object, will be absent. So this is subsequently later when we're in deeper meditation, and so will vichara. We say the mind discards vitaka and vichara. Actually, it's not so much that they are discarded. What is really meant is that the mind becomes more concentrated, more compact. When it's calm, then vitaka and vichara are too coarse to stay within it. And so it's said that they are discarded. Without vitaka lifting the mind to the object and vichara to appreciate its nature, there is simply this experience of repleteness, bliss, and one-pointedness. So that in Pali is ekagata. I don't use the terms first, second, third, and fourth jhana. I speak only of lucid calm and of vitaka, vichara, rapture, bliss, and unity. Unity is another word for the one-pointedness or ekagata. And now translators are more likely to use um, for samadhi to use the word immersion, one-pointedness, and concentration are words that can tend to, let's see, concentration in particular tends to cause us to tighten. And actually, the one-pointedness is the clarity of being present with that, just fully present with that one object, not shifting around. But the experience is more relaxed and open. That's how it comes about. So he just uses these words of lucid calm, vitaka, vichara, rapture, bliss, and unity, and of their progressive abandonment until only equanimity remains. This development is called the power of samadhi, the natural expressions of the mind that has realized lucid calm. So there is a gradual movement in stages that depends on constant and frequent practice. Samadhi can be divided into two kinds, wrong samadhi and right samadhi. Take good notice of this distinction. In wrong samadhi, the mind is unwavering. It enters a calmness which is completely silent and lacking all awareness. So this is the distinction. So we can feel like we are very calm and the mind is focused on one thing, it's not wandering, but actually we're not alert. So mindfulness is always an essential factor, that we're present and alert. There's the awareness is there. You can be in this state that he described of complete silence and lacking awareness for a couple hours or even all day. But during that time, you have no idea where you've got to or what the state of the mind is. This is wrong samadhi. It's like a knife that you've sharpened well and then just put away without using. You gain no benefit from it. It's a diluted calm that lacks alertness. You think that you've reached the end of the practice of meditation and don't search for anything more. It's a danger, an enemy. At this stage, it's dangerous to you because it prevents wisdom from arising. There can be no wisdom without a sense of moral discrimination. So that's an interesting point, I think, that right samadhi has wisdom and discernment, that you're able to know what's wholesome and unwholesome, what's correct and what's not. And that there is this incredible brightness of mind in terms of the clarity and presence of mindfulness. And then these other factors that help to bring samadhi about, that um, experience of joy or piti, that that spiritual energy building, and a more subtle sense of calm, of happiness, which is sukha. And then it's those come about, of course, because of that attention to the object and our interest in it, our investigation of it. And then when the mind becomes solidified on sort of one, um, it's not it's not distracted. It's solidified in one point, or the unity. Saying one pointed, I think, can be a little bit misleading, because it's not necessarily like you're just focused down and it's only it's not a tightness. And that's the thing. We want to be aware that um, the immersion is a solidity of mind, a stability of mind, but it can also, um, it also has this calm, this peacefulness and openness and relaxed feeling. No matter how deep right samadhi becomes, it's always accompanied by awareness. There is a perfect mindfulness and alertness, a constant knowing. Right samadhi is a kind of samadhi that never leads you astray. This is a point that practitioners should clearly understand. You can never dispense with the knowing. For it to be right samadhi, the knowing must be present from the beginning right until the end. Please keep observing this, he says. I hope you can still see the sunshine's kind of bright here this morning, coming in the window. If it gets too distracting, I can change the blinds, but let me know. So I think you can get a sense of right samadhi if we get too focused on the definitions. It can slow us down, even throw us off the track. This idea of and also this idea that we think it's too difficult, that we can't experience it. It needs to start with maybe less expectation and a real settling of the mind in a way that's grounded in the meditation object, but also has this kind of, I find, a loving kind of presence, a sense of being happy um, and caring. The whole softening of the heart, so that the whatever tension might be there can be relaxed. And then the mind is open for this upwelling of faith, of joy, of contentment, of peace. And it's in the letting go, the happiness, that the mind can become still and clear. There's another distinction here that Ajahn Chah makes around pleasant feeling. He said the pleasant and the unpleasant are states of being, states we're born into, expressions of attachment. So the idea that, yes, the Buddha said the happy mind is easily concentrated, but we don't want to get attached to the bliss. As long as we attach to pleasant or unpleasant, there can be no liberation from samsara. The bliss of samadhi is not true inner peace. That peace comes through dwelling in the awareness of the true nature of the pleasant and unpleasant without attachment. Thus, it's taught that the mind that lies beyond the pleasant and the unpleasant is the true goal of Buddhism. So, um, what is the point of samadhi? It's really to develop wisdom. And when we see the kinds of lists or the progressions that the Buddha describes that lead to samadhi, the piti, the tranquility, etc., that brings us to samadhi, then oftentimes once we arrive at samadhi, the next thing is to see the way things actually are. And then the progression turns to wisdom and discovery, realizing that we can let go of our attachments to those conditioned things, um, the feelings, the experiences, etc. So the last thing in this section that Ajahn Chah, that is quoted from Ajahn Chah, says, having abided in the state of complete lucid calm for a sufficient time, the mind withdraws from it to contemplate the nature of external conditions in order to give rise to wisdom. And this is what we see in the suttas as well, that there is calm, samadhi, and then the mind withdraws from that, or when that's finished, when the mind has come to a natural kind of movement away from the deeper states of concentration, then we have that opportunity to investigate Dhamma, or it just naturally um, insight arises. So I would love to know what of this might need more clarification, and um, what kind of questions and what kinds of experiences you have that um, that we might be able to flesh out these ideas a bit more about what samadhi is, how we put in the conditions to experience it, and then in our experiences how to work with it.
So, Ayya, could you flesh out the act of investigation? Talk a little bit more about how one does that.
Yeah, so even in, well, whether it's the four foundations of mindfulness, or in mindfulness of in and out breathing, or in some of the other ways that the Buddha describes, like the transcendent chain of dependent origination, where we move through samadhi and then we investigate, or sometimes, like in the seven factors of enlightenment, investigation of Dhamma comes early on, right after establishing mindfulness. And even the investigation of Dhamma at that stage brings up a lot of energy, and then the PT. So investigation and insight um, can be anytime, but the experience that many experienced meditators report is that the um, the time after the mind has come to some level of immersion or peace is when it's more likely that that insight will arise. So this investigation of Dhamma sets the stage for that. And when we talk about insight arising, it's really something that's coming from deeper reaches of the mind, or coming from the natural unfolding of Dhamma. But of course, um, it's helpful to set the conditions in place for that to occur. And then, I think in your question, it's like, what do we do? How do we do that? And it really is I find taking a theme like impermanence, dukkha, and not self. Looking at whatever is in our view, whatever is in our mind, and applying those characteristics. That's one approach. We can also look at, it depends on what's arising. Let's say there's some strong desire or attachment. Someone was just talking to me on retreat about having this attraction for someone else who's on retreat. And of course, this is a very common thing that happens. We go on retreat and then we don't have much going on, and the mind starts to um, create distractions and gets interested in somebody. Well, this kind of longing can be examined, as well as anything else that might arise in our feelings, in our thinking repeatedly, in our thoughts. And then we can examine that. We can examine it as, from one of these templates that the Buddha offers, like those three characteristics, or we can examine it with something like the gratification, danger, and escape, which is another way that the Buddha suggested looking at things. And there are other ways that he suggested, but the idea is, if we can bring our attention to the true nature of this experience, whether it's something we desire, something we want to get rid of or are averse to, something we're passing judgment on, complaints we have about other people, life, the world, whatever. All of these kinds of thoughts and feeling that comes with it. Investigation means looking at it, trying to see it in the light of Dhamma. When we have strong emotions, turning towards that feeling in the body. This is another kind of investigation. And if we do these investigations, we can actually do this like all the time through your day. Um, you can use these methods, and that helps, because then you sit in samadhi, or whatever state we find is accessible, and then we can either bring up or work with whatever comes up with this kind of reflection on Dhamma. In the Anapanasati Sutta, the Buddha talks about using impermanence, viraga, which is fading away, or dispassion, the cessation of suffering if we let go, cessation, and letting go, relinquishment. So there's these different kinds of formula, or templates of ways of looking at things. And then as we reflect, it's it's not a it's not so much an intellectual kind of um, analysis. It's more contemplative. It's helpful if it's more contemplative. And what I mean by that is, the idea is there. You see, like, okay, let's say we take this example of feeling attraction to someone we don't even know. That's the way it is on retreat, right? You don't know this person at all. Here we are on retreat, everybody's got masks, you haven't even seen their whole face, right? But the mind's making up this fantasy. So you look at this fantasy and you just drop in, what's the danger? What's the gratification? What am I getting out of this? And instead of trying to think it through, just let whatever comes up come intuitively. And then the same with the danger. It's like if the more we can kind of, at least this is what I think, the more we can practice letting the idea sit there, hang there, kind of drop it into the space and let our intuition respond. The more we kind of open up to those deeper reaches of the mind. And sometimes things that come up are quite surprising. And um, and it is important that we know whether or not what we're experiencing comes from Dhamma or comes from defilement. And usually it's pretty easy to tell.
Okay, thank you. If someone else has a question, you're all muted, so if you can just press unmute and ask your question to Ayya.
Ayya, I wonder if you could go more deeply into the nature of investigation. I understand it from a clinical perspective because my livelihood is that of a clinician, but I don't think that when you or other Dharma teachers suggest investigation, I don't think my understanding is accurate. So I wonder if you could speak a little bit more about the nature of it and what really is it. And I hope I was clear with you.
Yeah, I have a question for you. So, do you have an example of something that you might investigate? Or like, do you have a sense? Like when you investigate, what do you do?
Um, like when I'm on the cushion, and if something that keeps pulling, the pulling is an indication to me to go with that. And so I see where it is lodged in the body, what color is it, what shape, what size, and work it, investigate it that way. And then oftentimes it'll kind of dissipate. And if it's really huge, like childhood trauma or something, it takes more times to be with that and care for that in the way that I referenced. But investigation is suggested so often. I think it's got to be more simple than what I'm describing to you.
Yeah, so this
It's
is
got
great.
to be more simple. Yeah. Thank you.
Well, what you're describing is definitely an important um, kind of investigation. I mean, it's very much like focusing or even feeding your demons is a similar kind of thing. It's like or somatic experiencing this kind of working with feeling, um, and that is an important kind of investigation. And the way I look at that is that that's really using the first three noble truths. That's turning towards the dukkha, understanding it, finding the cause, abandoning that cause, and experiencing the cessation of that dukkha through the body. And I think this is what the Buddha was talking about, wanting us to turn towards dukkha rather than the 150 ways we have of trying to escape it. But you're right in saying that there are other kinds of investigation. And the way that other kinds of investigation that I'm thinking of work is through principles of Dhamma. So I'll just give an example from my life that was sometimes these more potent kind of times in our lives can bring it into clearer focus. So there was a point where my husband told me he didn't want to be married anymore, and it just came completely out of the blue for me. So you can kind of imagine. I mean, I thought that we had a good relationship, and I mean, anyhow, it was really a big surprise. And I had been practicing quite a while already, and that was really helpful. So I could, let me see if I can kind of do something with this light. I'm sorry. So I could really try to reflect on everything that was coming up in the light of Dhamma. First of all, I was looking at, why is this so painful to me? And, I know that this relationship is impermanent. That's clear. Why is this so painful? What I realized, and this was an intuitive thing that came up, is, well, I expected it to be more permanent than this. I mean, yes, I know it's going to end at some point, but I had these expectations. And so it was through reflecting on, why am I so thrown by this, that helped me to understand. But it was in that light of, yes, there is impermanence. And then I had moved into his house, so I was going to be the one leaving, and I was, like, everything that I looked at, I knew I wouldn't be doing the same things anymore. I'd walk up and down. If I walked up the stairs, I would think, I'm not going to be walking on these stairs anymore. If I'm holding a cup in the kitchen and look at the cup, I'm not going to be using this cup anymore. I'm really like putting the impermanence in clear, just really clearly seeing it. And I knew that I was doing it in the light of Dhamma. It's like I'm looking at it not to make myself feel bad. It wasn't about emphasizing those feelings. It was about, look at the impermanent nature of this. Look at the suffering that comes when I am clinging to this. And what does it feel like to let go of this? And that's the investigation in the light of Dhamma. Or like I said, we can do this with everything. And as we do, we start the Dhamma of it starts to take the biggest part of our mind, of our mental space on it. The Dhamma really arose in my mind very strongly during that time, because like I said, when we have strong feelings or strong experiences, we have that potential for a stronger Dhamma to arise. And so really looking, like when we investigate the body, for example, investigating the parts of the body, thinking about how they can fail, thinking about what happens, how will I feel if all of a sudden this body part doesn't work anymore. And it's not to be morbid or sad, it's to really bring the mind to the Dhamma. And then what happens when we are repeatedly reflecting and investigating such things is that it starts to become more natural, that's where we go when something changes. It's right to the principles of Dhamma. I hope that helps.
I would like to ask a question, please, if I may.
Sure.
I have this book from Rinpoche. You probably are aware of this book.
I don't know. I'm sorry. I can't really read it because I'm on my phone, but
The Tibetan Yoga of Dream and Sleep.
I'm sorry again.
The title of the book is The Tibetan Yoga of Dream and Sleep.
Oh, okay. No, I'm not familiar with it.
All right. But anyways, in this book, they say that it is possible to, during sleep, to do this type of dream or meditation during sleep.
Uh-huh.
Since the topic of this talk is about the investigation, I'd like to I'd like to know if you're in your tradition, you have practiced this, or if you could sort of say a few words about it, if you can. Thank you.
Well, personally, I feel like I have done investigation and Dhamma practice in sleep. I don't know. I mean, it's certainly not it. I don't think it's something that's um, kind of important or essential. I mean, it's just that if you practice Dhamma in every possible kind of reflection on Dhamma in your daily life a lot, you may well also do that in sleep. I mean, the Buddha doesn't talk about this specifically in the suttas, at least as far as I know. But when we work a lot with dreams, or people have the ability to have lucid dreams, changing the way dreams are going while you're in it, kind of thing, then you can also be using Dhamma principles in the same way. But I feel like, at least in my experience, the way to really do that is by what I just described of using Dhamma principles like the three characteristics, the gratification, danger, and escape, applying different ways of seeing the Dhamma in, through your day. And then it's going to carry over into your night. And I want to make the distinction here that we're the Noble Eightfold Path, talking about, right samadhi. This opens the way to investigation. And it's not really that you cleanly separate the calm of samatha and the investigative aspect of vipassana. But it is good to see that the samadhi is really there for the purpose of investigation, and that investigation is more than that. So it's good that we are looking at this, I think. Let's see if we can turn this computer a little bit. Let me turn this. So
I have
maybe
a
we can see
question.
better.
You're talking that it should be pretty clear to know the difference between Dhamma and defilement, but could you elaborate on that?
But maybe not, huh?
Maybe not.
That sunlight is really strong today.
It's
Okay.
beautiful.
Yeah. Well, I guess the best indicator is that Dhamma is calming and defilements are not. So if we become more peaceful, and of course we have to have some knowledge that Dhamma is about letting go. It's about not being attached. It's not about building up, like excitement and all that. It's about becoming more and more peaceful and calm and less attached, letting go, practicing relinquishment, and practicing in a way that we naturally become disenchanted with the unconditioned, which is the world. Disenchantment meaning we're not caught up in the delusion of how we're going to be happy because we get this or we get rid of that. That's not going to lead to happiness and peace. So the defilements are greed, hatred, and delusions. So if something's leading to more desire or more aversion or more confusion, it's not Dhamma.
Yeah, I guess I'm just experiencing a lot of stuff coming up. I mean, Sangamita's been working with me, and just a unconditioned trauma, right? That I don't even aware, and the body just starts shaking, or I just start becoming
Yeah.
so debilitated, right? So she's been practicing or like become orientated and stuff. So it's like, to me, I definitely don't feel more peaceful, but um it's like, how long for this to rewire? I guess just keep on practicing and looking, and and eventually maybe it will stop shaking. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, that's how it is with trauma. It comes up and it comes through the body, and you've got a wonderful friend there in Sangamita because she knows what she's doing. and it does take, oftentimes it does take time, and what we most need in those circumstances is patience, and really recognizing that it is only the way through this experience that we get free of it. It doesn't mean we have to revisit all of the things of the past. We don't. But whenever they come up, then the way to be with them is to observe them and stay with it as they kind of run their course. It's kind of like you get a cold, you get the flu, you just have to bear with it until it runs its course. And and you can get repeated, bouts of it, but it will diminish as if we continue to turn towards it and be present with it. It will diminish. And then the investigation of Dhamma in this regard is you know just trying to see things in terms of Dhamma, that this too is impermanent. And if we kind of let our minds kind of go down with it, if we get attached to it, it's suffering. But if we can see it as just something passing through because of whatever happened in the past, then we don't have to suffer with it. We can just like, okay, yeah, it's shaking, yeah, it's painful, yeah, it's all that, but we can look at it from a more solid perspective and see, okay, this is just another, like another bout of malaria. It's just passing through. It's not me and it's not mine. This is another very important way of reflecting on Dhamma. Is this me? Is this mine? Is this myself? No. You can say no to everything. It doesn't belong to you. And if we can really see that from that truth, then we can withstand it. It's easier to handle it. And it's true. It's not you. It's not yours. But for whatever reasons, we all have a history. We all have karma from the past. We don't have to identify with it. Right now, we're not responsible for whatever happened back then. Now we can say, okay, I'll just have to watch this happen and bear with it as it passes through. But that's all.
Thank you.
I'm very happy you're doing this work. This is the way to happiness and stability.
I have a follow-up question. Before you were mentioning about dukkha and going into it, like being with it. And so my question is on this, the Buddha in the Majjhima Nikaya, he has like 5 ways to let go of thoughts. And then there's the 4 right efforts. So the first 2 are about not letting arise or abandoning hindrances. So anyway, I hear some teachers just saying like, don't do anything, just sit with things. But then I'm reading the Buddha and he's saying, don't tolerate these things, abandon them. So
Right.
if you can just talk a little bit about the balance between turning towards and being with, but then putting in the skillful means to abandon.
Yeah, it's actually not that difficult to sort out, because the things you abandon are thoughts, and the things you turn towards are feelings.
Mm.
So if you have a painful feeling arising, if you try to abandon that, you wind up suppressing it or ignoring it somehow, not dealing with it. But when the Buddha talks about abandoning, he's talking about abandoning thought. So a thought comes into the mind. We didn't ask for it. It's old karma. We don't have to take responsibility for that thought. But the next thought, the ones that we can, if we continue down that track, that's a choice. And we need to be real. If we're really mindful, we can catch it. We can catch a thought of jealousy, a thought of hatred, a thought of cruelty, a thought of aversion, a thought of lust, a thought of, you can see those are to be abandoned. He said, don't tolerate those, as you say. It's not correct to just watch the mind go off into fantasizing about how you want to, be with this person you shouldn't be with. That's not appropriate. That's unskillful. But what's skillful is you have that thought of maybe of lust, and you say, no, I'm not going to think about this. I'm not going to fuel that fire. I love the Buddha's simile of the bonfire. There's this fire burning there. That comes up with some kind of greed, hatred, or delusion, right? And then he says, if you keep throwing little bits of dry leaves and grass and sticks on there, it keeps going. But if you stop doing that, it dies down. And that's exactly what we're talking about. That's feeling. And feeling is fueled by thought. If we think about it, if we really look at it, our thoughts determine how we feel. And the feeling that comes up from old things, if we turn towards it, let it pass away without adding new fuel, without thinking, yeah, that person, they said that to me and that was really mean. If we think like that, we keep throwing the sticks on the fire and then we don't get through it. But if we just sit with the feeling, if we turn towards the feeling when that thought arises of what that person said, then we can work through it. We can let the feeling take its course. That's what takes its course, not a thought process. That's not, if we let that take its course, it can take us into very dangerous territory.
Thank you so much for that fantastic clarification. Yeah, so that's very much like Thich Nhat Hanh's holding technique, which I practice, which is based on the Buddha's bonfire analogy. Yeah, thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Mm-hmm. Any more questions?
I've got one. And my apologies for the showing up in the robe business here. I've got a convalescing dog that took me out of bed immediately and I came to this. Anyway, my question is, and this is
I'm showing up in a robe too. I just wanted you to know.
Yes. So but my question is sort of around investigation, because I do get some confusion there, because I think for me, sort of one of my habits from early in life is to always be investigating. And of course, that keeps me up at night. And that's another reason why I'm in the robe. So, kind of determining, sort of a healthy investigation versus something that's actually a hindrance.
Yes.
That's my question. So if you can speak to that at all, that'd be great.
Yes. Well, I think the first distinction that we want to look at is what kind of investigating is it? Is it contemplation or is it analysis? Analysis, the investigation in the thinking mind, is sometimes useful, of course, and we need that function. But that's oftentimes the one that can get overused. And then so contemplation is different because, it's a little more like, you ask the question and then you let it sit there and you see what comes back. Like, that book, I was just thinking about that book, the Conversations with God. It's kind of like, I'm not sure God was answering, but it's really that kind of thing where you're not really trying to sort it out, analytically. And like I said, of course, analytical investigation is useful. It can be, but real wisdom comes from direct experience, which is the knowing that arises from contemplation or from, bringing the mind to peace, like samadhi.
Yeah.
So those kinds of things that keep us up at night, or like the mind kind of going into overdrive, that's just something that we need to look at, like, what am I getting out of this? Like, what's the gratification here? And then a lot of it can be habit. And what's the danger? Well, it's tiring, and maybe there's a way of kind of getting wrapped up going in circles, or kind of just looking at that, like, what's the danger, and then what's the escape? Like, how do I escape? When the Buddha is talking about escape here, it's a positive thing. It's not I'm escaping from my feelings and therefore suppressing them. It's the escape from suffering. It's, how do I let go of this? And so what happens then is that instead of thinking, you're reflecting, you're contemplating, you're thinking. And this process is a process of mindfulness and investigation. It's not a process of more thinking. It's like, I'm looking at this, what is the danger? What am I getting out of this? And you're not, it's not an analysis. It's like, what am I getting out of this? Just let that be there and see what happens, see what comes. You might have an immediate answer, or it might be something that you reflect on for a while. And then, like, what is the danger? What's the problem with this thinking? Well, I don't sleep. That's one thing. The mind never rests. It's tired. Ajahn Ganha is a very wonderful monk that, you're visiting in Thailand, and he said, you have to rest your mind. He said, if you don't, it's like an airplane that never lands, and then it crashes. It's like, you have to, like, just kind of let it go. And of course it's not easy. We have these very deeply ingrained habits, and when we see the gratification, like, it'll be interesting to know what's there. Why is this something that I tend towards? So I hope that makes sense. It's like, this is the case of everything. This is what mindfulness is really for. It's for being present with and not consumed in a feeling or a mental activity. It's observing it. You're standing away from it. Just like earlier, talking about having a feeling, noticing where it is in the body and what color is it and what shape and how big. That's all. That inquiry is establishing mindfulness. As soon as you ask a question about the process, it's mindfulness. And so observe your thinking and see what happens.
Thank you.
So we've come to the end of our time. Ayya, would you like us to end with a chant again?
Should we do it once
Okay.
or 3 times?
What? I don't know how much time people have.
Okay.
I'll let you intuit it.
Samadhi, sama sankappo, sama vacha, sama kamanto, sama ajivo, sama vayamo, sama sati, sama samadhi. Thank you.